Howdy folks, and welcome back to the channel. I wanted to let you in on a little secret of mine today. In fact, it's kind of like 5 secrets to tell the truth. In this video, I will cover 5 things I wish I knew before I started my private investigations business. As I work through my end of year recap process and my beginning of the year planning process, it really got me thinking about the things I do now that I didn't do way back in 2008 when I started my company. The first thing I wish I knew before I started my private investigation business is that it is, well, a business. Now you are probably thinking, well, duh, that is why it's called a business, because it is a business. How could you not know that? Obviously, I knew I was starting a business. After all, I had been running businesses for many decades at that point. In fact, I got tired of making millionaires millions, and that is why I started my own business, but I didn't give it a lot of thought to it being a business. I was more in the mindset that I was now an entrepreneur and I was calling the shots. In past businesses which I managed and operated, there were set rules, guidelines, and a clear definition of what the business entailed and what services or products it provided and what the long-term goals were for the business. That brings me to the next thing on my list of what I wish I knew before I started my private investigations business. I wish I knew the planning that was required for the business. Listen up. This is how I got started in the business, folks. I was at the end of a job for a fairly successful real estate company. With that company, I was brought in to help clean up some problems and issues and help them as their operations manager move the company to the next level. This was one of my biggest problems back then with jobs that I had. I mostly worked for small startup and troubled companies, and folks, let me tell you, most small and startup companies are troubled companies, to be sure. Every job I took, I knew going in it was for a finite time. I knew eventually I would have met the goals they hired me for, and I would be moving on. And man, I love that part of my jobs. No long-term commitments. I got to learn a lot about many different companies, and I got to do a lot of traveling all around the country. But as I got older, I started realizing I was stuck in this loop of helping all these other people for their problems and making their companies successful, and I had little to show for it. So I started looking for my next gig as I was wrapping things up, and voila, there was this ad I saw online. Surveillance private investigator needed. No experience required. Will train the right person. This position is a 1099 self-employed position. You will be working for yourself and we will provide the cases. Call to schedule an interview. I was like, oh wow, this is cool. I could be a private investigator. I could do surveillance investigations. I could run my own business and I could work for myself. So I called them and I got the interview and I put on my best song and dance show about all I knew about surveillance investigations and running a business. And then they handed me a contract, sent me home and said, look this over and let us know if you're still interested. That interview was on a Friday, and by that Monday I had my first cases assigned to me, and the rest is history. But I had little to no business planning before starting this great adventure, so I literally started my business planning while out on surveillance. I really wish I had known how much business planning was required to be successful. That lack of pre-planning my business did create some bumps along the road, to be sure. But one of those things I had never planned for was the workflow. And workflow, folks, in this industry is directly related to cash flow. That is the next thing I wish I knew before I got started as a private investigator. I wish I knew how much the business, the work, the cash flow would change over the course of the year. And not only does the work and cash fluctuate over time, but from year to year too. There is one thing I learned quickly in this business. You cannot count on steady work all of the time. Now, I do know that once a PI business gets its roots set, once it has been going for a while, then things do tend to steady out a bit. But even then, there are the slow times and the busy times, to be sure. And planning for those is a must, folks. You need to plan your time, your ancillary jobs like marketing, business review, those fun things around those ebbs and flows of business. And you have to plan your money wisely. I have seen a lot of PIs start out as a surveillance investigator in the spring and think, oh my goodness, I can't keep up. And this goes on through spring, picks up in the summer, carries on into the fall. Then the end of fall and winter comes along and they have but a fraction of the work. and they done spent all that money they made all spring and summer and have little to live on to get them through the winter months. In this business, folks, budgeting your dollars to the penny is a must. You have to make sure you only pay yourself what you absolutely need and save the rest for a rainy day. And another thing, folks, those rainy days will come and they can last a long time. December, January, and February are long months for many a PI out there. Those tend to be the slowest months usually. I also wish I knew before I became a private investigator how long it would take me to be making a decent living. Remember, when I got started, I was working for one larger PI firm and it sounded like they had tons of work. And they did. Well, sort of. They did a lot of the investigations in-house and they had other investigators working for them too. They had also hired me for a specific region, so getting those metro jobs, which were more abundant, wasn't on their radar initially. In fact, my first calendar year revenue as a PI, folks, was about $5,000. That's it, $5,000. Now this was the end of the year, but it was much less than I had expected. And my first full calendar year revenue was maybe $20,000. Still nothing to write home about, but I was seeing some growth in the business. It wasn't until my third year when I started seeing some decent income from it, and I knew that it could be a long-term endeavor for me. Now, the next thing I wish I knew before I became a private investigator is how hard it is to get work. Like I said, when I got started, I was doing subcontract work for one investigation firm. The work was slow coming in, to be sure. I was calling them several times a week to see if they had anything for me. In fact, I bugged them enough times that they started to send me some bones here and there. They started to send me some of those cases in the metro area, kind of close to where I lived, just to make me stop calling. I tried calling attorneys, sending letters, sending emails, doing some advertising, created a website, all those normal marketing and sales things, and they all got me just about nowhere. Now, I had got my name out there. I had a website up that was starting to gain some traction, but I had no idea how hard it was to get the work or even get people to call. It is not magic, folks. You do not just create a website and voila, your phone rings. You do not just send out mailings, create ads, and make phone calls, and people just buy your investigative services. All of those things are great to do if done correctly, but the bottom line, the one thing I really, truly do wish I knew before I became a private investigator, folks, is the niche and finicky market it really is. That is right. It is a very finicky business indeed, and unlike just about any other type of service-related business out there. I had experience in just about every type of business you can imagine in my past, but nothing prepared me for the special circumstances of being a private investigator. You see, most business models are built on one key factor, and that key factor is repeat business. People tend to shop at the same stores, eat at the same restaurants, use the same plumbers, electricians, and handymen throughout their lives. But people are not out there hiring private investigators every other week or month or even year for the most part. In fact, the vast majority of people will never have the need to hire a PI their entire life. I know there are those PI firms who land a contract with an insurance company or two, with a law firm or two, or even with a larger PI firm like I did when I got started. And you know what? I could still be working for that same large firm, still doing surveillance work and be making a living, but I wanted a little bit more as an entrepreneur. I wanted to do other types of investigations and I didn't want it to be so job-like. So I eventually went out fully on my own, getting my own customers, setting my rates, working my schedule. And this is great, but man, folks, you need to understand this. You have to plan your business wisely, manage your money frugally, and watch out for all those unexpected things that will crop up over time. And you have to be ready to sell the job when the customer calls. This is your bonus tip, folks. Learning how to sell the job is crucial. You have, in most cases, one shot at closing that sale, one shot at getting the job, and one shot to convince the customer to hire you. You may not realize this, folks, but you have competition, and that competition most likely is very aware of all of the difficulties it takes to get the job, close the sale, and win that customer. Your competitor is not going to let them go easily because the one big truth, listen up, come a little bit closer. If you do not close the sale when you have the customer on the phone, they are more than likely going to call your competition and they will close the sale. When I got started, I knew that I knew how to make my phone ring, and man, did it ever ring. But I had to re-educate myself on closing those sales. I thought the customer needs some time to think about this. I thought the client has to make some decisions, so I will give them some space. I thought for sure they will call me back. And folks, I was wrong. That is right. The PI guy was wrong. And it didn't take me long to figure that out and start closing those sales the right way. In fact, this was such a hard-learned lesson, I wrote this book entitled Sales Basics for Private Investigators to help other PIs just like you learn my secrets to closing the sale. I will leave a link down below to all my books as well my online training classes. Make sure you check them out. And if you want to hear some super easy phone sales tips, then check out this video.